All right. We're live. New video link. Let me know in the chat. Is this working better? It might end up just being a handful of people because this is not ideal, but we'll see if it works. Let me know. If it was just audio, is audio video? Do it because it could be. I might need to get a new adapter for my mic. You sound good, DB? DB, we good? We good to rock and roll, everybody? Oh, Detroit, we're working? We good, D? All right, JD, all right, we might be good. We back. All right, good. All right, this is okay. Okay. It could go back and forth to watch him. Yeah. All right, perfect. All right, sweet. Oh, hell yeah. Let's rock. Oh, hell yeah. Snoochie Moochies, Ruckus. Let's go, brother. All right. Where was I talking about? Where are we leaving off? All right, Kevin, let's just get it hot. Let's get it going. Need one running back, one wide receiver, one flex from the following Flowers, Hall, BTJ, Connor, MHJ, BTJ, and MH on the bench now. They have easier matchups. This is a bit of a conundrum, but if you need one running back, I'm going to go with Brees. Definitely going to go with Big Hall. And if you need two other positions, so I'm going to go with Flowers, and then I'm going to go with James Conner. Then I'm going to go James Conner. I like Conner this week against Minnesota. The matchup's always tough, but I love the over-under. I think there's going to be a lot of points here. He just got the extensione. But, yeah, that's what I'm going to go with here. Oh, my man, Nick. Hey, you came at the right time, Nick. I was having some mic issues, apparently. We had to reboot this baby. All right. Anyway, you could play Tank over Garrett with the juicy matchup. So this week for me, I have Tank Dell ranked at 25, but I have Garrett Wilson up at 13. I like Garrett Wilson in terms of the usage with Aaron Rodgers. So I'm gonna stick with Garrett Wilson and just trust the process. This is a good matchup for Dell, no doubt. I do like Dell, like I said, top 25 guy, but it just seems like maybe too cute right there. We back, Elijah. Yes, sir. We back. All right, this feels good. All right. Let's just keep it going. We got some more questions in the chat. We'll get to those momentarily. If you have any lineup questions, please put them in the chat. But we're going to start here at the quarterback position, and we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of quarterbacks that I want to highlight. My rankings are here on the bottom, so you can see that. And if you want the full rankings, head over to southharmonff.com. You'll be able to get access to all of my rankings at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. But the first quarterback that I want to talk about here in my rankings is CJ Stroud. So Stroud I have ranked at QB4. Stroud has the easiest matchup for fantasy football purposes. The Jaguars give up about 5.3 points over league average. And things have not gone well for Stroud. If you're using the WoRP tool over at South Harmon FF, then you'll notice like how tough it's been for CJ Stroud. But I think this is that type of get right game, divisional game, super easy matchup. And when you look at the underlying metrics, there are some that are encouraging, but there are also some that suggest that maybe he's not having the most successful season. But we need answers for this week. We're trying to get wins in week 13, push us into the playoffs. And CJ Stroud is a guy that I'm playing over pretty much everybody other than just a handful. Like I said, got him at QB4 this week. He's airing it out, which is what we like to see out of a guy with accuracy like CJ Stroud. He's got the most air yards in the NFL, but he's just throwing a lot of pickable passes. He's making a lot of danger plays. He's just out there kind of getting out of schedule, getting out of frame in terms of what we're used to, what he made him so good as a rookie. But in terms of this matchup, like I said, it's very easy against a divisional foe. He's had success against the Jaguars throughout his young career. So for CJ Stroud, I'm ready to rock and roll for CJ Stroud. I think that this is going to be a good matchup, a game in which, again, we're talking about a bad secondary that just really haven't gotten a pass rush going, the Jaguars. And I know they're coming off a bye, but what can that team just what can the morale be on that team? Right? They brought back Doug Peterson, they didn't fire him over the bye. And and the fact that Trevor Lawrence is going to play, I don't know if it has a significant impact on how this game kind of goes, but I do think that we've seen a push in terms of the overs, which now we've seen the over-under settle at 44. for this matchup. So again, I think that when we're looking at just the success that he's had against this team, the softness of the matchup, and the projected implied totals, this is just a no-brainer play for CJ Stroud. So if you've been a bit nervous to play him, I think this is the week kind of a get-right game. And honestly, week 13, get-right games might be a little bit of the theme that we're going to be talking about here. There's a few guys in these that'll be talked about throughout the show that are kind of get-right guys. The next guy I want to talk about is Kirk Cousins. Kirk changed. Got him at QB 17. So in our 1 QB leagues, he's kind of a stay away. He's just been too inconsistent. But in our super flex leagues, he's more of an enticing option. Now, he's kind of been the tale of two quarterbacks this year, which is kind of why I wanted to bring him up, why I wanted to talk about Kirk Cousins. Because we've seen him throw for 500 yards, be QB1 on the week. That was back in week 5. We've seen him be QB3. But then since that QB3 finish in week 8, QB17, QB19, and last week, QB28 when the Denver Broncos had their way with Kirk Chains. Now, the weaponry is going to be there. Mooney's going to play. Of course, Bijan. Of course, London and Kyle Pitts has been a contributor for sure in this offense. But the matchup's kind of middle of the road. 21st best matchup. The Chargers have been really, they've been a pretty good unit. Last week, they kind of got beat up a little bit, but, it's Lamar. It's the Ravens. But why I might be interested in playing Cousins and the thing about Cousins is the over-under. 47.5. It's gone up. There is points to be expected to be scored. You do have the Chargers going across country for an early window game that typically kind of slows a defense down early on, which could help a team like the Falcons. But here's the big deterrent. So here's the clash. This is the angel and the devil. The angel is the matchup, the over-under, the home game, the potential to score a lot of points. The devil is the defense will be going against. Now, there's this interesting stat that I had found that I wanted to make sure I bring up. So this we're going to talk about it in terms of Kirk Cousins, but of course it has it also falls into the jurisdiction when you're trying to make your decisions of Drake May, got Patriots on the mind, Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Kyle Pitts, all that stuff. So the Falcons scored 17 less points on average when they lose than when they do and they win. So they average about 30 points in wins and only 12 and a half points in losses. So if you believe that they're going to win, then we're going to fire up Kirk Cousins. We're going to fire it up. We're going to make sure that Mooney's in our lineup. We're going to play Kyle Pitts. If you think they're going to lose, then I think we're going to have to make some pivots, people. So that's why I wanted to bring up Kirk Cousins, is because there's a huge split in terms of when they're winning and when they're losing and how many points they score in those games. So you got to ask yourself, do you think they're going to win? If the answer is yes, fire them up. If you think they're going to lose, start making some other arrangements. Okay. And I know that's not always the best information, but sometimes, folks, you got to make your own decisions. You got to make your calls. You're the ones, kind of running your team. So make sure you got this information and make the right decision. I personally think they're going to lose. So I have been kind of steering away from those type of players. But of course, with London, the targets are so good. They're so good. So I don't think they're going to win. I'm nervous about the ancillary players, but I needed to bring that up. Made sure I brought it to everyone's attention. But let's move to the running back position. And I do want to start with Jaylen Warren. So Jaylen Warren started the year hurt. He had the hamstring injury, and that let Najee Harris kind of just take over the reins here, right? Just let him kind of do the thing. And then he came back. We started seeing more usage right around week 7. Then he got hurt again. Or week 4 came back after that. But over these last 2 weeks now, Jaylen Warren has been on the field 36% of the time, 56.5% of snaps in week 12 in that Thursday night game, the snow game, which you would have assumed would have been a lot more Najee. But it was some Jaylen Warren. And now over these last 2 weeks, 9 targets, 7 receptions. He's at 120 total yards in those 2 games, so over 60 per. He got the touchdown last week, and now he's been over double digits each of the last 2 weeks. Now, I got Jaylen Warren at 27, and I have Najee Harris a couple spots ahead at 20. Actually 24 and 20. So after my adjustments, it's Jaylen Warren at running back 24 and Najee Harris at 20. So I do have Najee getting the nod, but man, Jaylen Warren is coming. Now, pause. Okay, let's keep it going. Not Jaylen Warren. Here's the thing about either guy, though. Both of their playoff schedules for fantasy suck. They have tough matchups literally from now to the end of the season. So in terms of the matchups that we'll be exploiting, we're not excited about it. But the reason why I had to bring up Warren, because the theme of today's show is getting these wins in week 13 to help us get into the playoffs. And the decision of which running back to play, it's razor thin. I'm still going Najee by a slight little bit, but the targets are starting to accumulate for Jaylen Warren. Now, the Bengals are a middle-of-the-road matchup in terms of stopping opposing running backs on the ground, but in terms of the receiving game, they're actually above league average. They're pretty good at stopping running backs from making a difference in the passing game. They give up about 2.5 points less than league average in that department. So that's why I'm giving the nod slightly to Najee, but man, it's starting to get difficult to make the decision because we've seen this too in the past where Jaylen Warren started to eat away, then took over a lot of the fantasy work. And with Najee theoretically not coming back next year, they may start to look and see what they have in Jaylen Warren. Now, if you're in a seasonal league, Warren might be available. You got to pick him up if he is. In our shallow leagues, you got to pick him up because, like I said, these targets are starting to ramp up in a 56% snap share. That was a season high for Warren. It's not good for our Najee rosters, I'll say that. But in terms of the here and the now, I'm going to go Najee slightly. But if you need a flex and he's available, like I said, top 24 running back for me this week. He's a player that you got to keep an eye on. Got to keep an eye on here as these last couple weeks before we end the fantasy regular season. I'm going to talk this next running back, and then after that, we'll go back to the chat and get some questions answered. So the next guy that I'm going to talk about, Jeremy McNichols. So we got the news yesterday. Austin Eckler is going to be on the IR with a concussion. And so far this season, Jeremy McNichols has been the player that comes in to kind of take over that role. And this week, I do have him ranked kind of generously inside of my top 30. This is obviously after the 4 games we've seen. So there's a lot of adjustments, but a top 30 play going into this afternoon. And the reason why I do like McNichols is Brian Robinson's banged up. He's going to play. So it's not that we're worried about Brian Robinson being on the field or not. But in terms of how he's utilized, here's the thing. Tennessee is really tough against the run. They're really tough about they're really stingy giving away fantasy points to opposing running backs. But where they can be exploited a bit is in the passing game for the opposing offense. And like I said, Jeremy McNichols will probably take over a little bit of that role, the way that they're going to kind of design plays if they're looking to pass it. Now, he hasn't seen a lot of targets on the season. He's really just he's scored touchdowns. He has 4 rushing touchdowns this year, which is kind of crazy. But I want to see how he's being utilized this game. I'm not playing him. I'm trying to make other arrangements, but I wanted to make sure we bring him up because the opportunity could be there over these next couple of weeks. So I know I picked him up in my seasonal league yesterday. I'm not playing him yet, but I do want to have that running back depth. I do want to make sure that I have him on my roster because, like I said, this is a guy that now is going to have a 4-week stretch where he's going to potentially have a pretty predominant role in that passing attack. And it's big time moments here for a team like the Commanders to get it going. They're on a bit of a skid right now. And could he be a spark? I don't know. I'm definitely going to want to see. I want to pick him up. I wanted to bring him up because, of course, he could factor into some of the most important games of our fantasy season. But as of this week, I'm going to fade him outside enough to not really be excited to start him. So All right, let's get into some questions in the chat before we keep it moving. We got a bunch here, and I can't wait to talk about all of them, every single one of them. All right, let's start at the top. PPR, Nick Westbrook, Akine, or McNichols, deep league. Don't cringe too hard. Well, Mighty Boosh, I hope you came back after the technical difficulties. So I'm gonna go with Nick Westbrook here. The touchdown luck has been so good. I'm gonna keep riding that wave, but this is this could flip wholeheartedly if I just see the usage for McNichols here, because of course they elevated Chris Rodriguez, but Rodriguez is more of a bruiser up the middle, so I don't see that being a role. But let's go with Nick Westbrook this week. Got him as a top 35 play. Touchdowns have been there. Big plays have been there. And, of course, Washington can be taken advantage of down the field because of their secondary is just really not that great. What's the weather going to do at Orchard Park? Play Josh Allen or sub out with Kirk Cousins? Jeremy, I'm still going to go with Josh Allen because even in the snow, there's a very high potential that he can run the ball. He could find the end zone a couple times. And like I mentioned, Kirk Cousins is on that fringe, whether I'm very excited to play him or not. So if you have the decision between Cousins or Allen, I'm going to go with Allen. It doesn't look like there'll be snow by kickoff, but who knows, because they have winter snow warnings. It's absolutely bananas. If you've seen the videos, it looks crazy. But Josh Allen's been pretty good in the snow because of his ability to run. And when you have a laser rocket arm, you can complete enough passes. I'm going to go with Allen here. I'm not going to go too crazy. Jameis or Mandrews in my super flex spot. Jameis has a tough matchup on Monday Night Football against the Denver Broncos. So I'm going to go with Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews, I mean, he's in the game of the week against the Eagles. Over 50-point over-under. He's been good. He was 15 fantasy points last week. Jameis in this matchup. Damn, that's a tough one, though, Johnny B. I'm going to go with the Andrews. I'm going to go with Andrews as long as it's PPR. As long as it's PPR, I'm going to go with it because I'm at tight end 4. I like him this week. I think he finds the end zone this week. And it just, even though Jameis could win in garbage time in terms of fantasy, he just doesn't give up. This defense is going to get after him, and he could have a bunch of turnovers this game. So I'm going to go with Andrews. Thoughts on Vidal? Well, it sounds like the coaches are excited to play him. It sounds like he's going to get a chance to play. But I don't want him in my lineup right now. I don't want him in my lineup because last week we saw too much Hassan Haskins. Maybe Harbaugh has a soft spot for him because of Michigan. So I don't know how the touch distribution will look between Vidal, Edwards, and Hassan Haskins. So I'm not willing to put him in my lineup. But again, in our seasonal formats, or if you're able to get him on your roster cheap, you got to have him on there because there is a chance he's just the best running back and it's not close. So he becomes the J.K. Dobbins while J.K. Dobbins is on the IR. So I think he has to be rostered. But if you need a win this week, I'm not willing to put my eggs in that basket to start him this week. I ranked him pretty high at running back 30, but I would rather play McNichols. I'd rather play Chubb. I'd rather play Rashad White. I'd rather play his teammate Gus Edwards this week, but definitely a player that you need to roster. Terminal sarcasm. Was that sarcastic? Sorry, couldn't help myself. Full point PPR. Would you sub out Ramondre for JSN? Flowers in the flex? Yes, give me JSN. Full point PPR, give me JSN. I don't care about the matchup. DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner, they play primarily on the edges, on the outside. JSN plays so many of his snaps inside the slot, and he's just been so good. He's been the reason why this offense has been able to move the football. I'm going to go with it. So if I had to rank these 3 for you, Terminal, I would go JSN, Flowers, and then Ramondre with my third option of these 3. I don't hate Ramondre. I got him inside my top 20 this week, but it's just sometimes with this offense, man, I just don't trust it. I'm going to go JSN with a bullet there for sure. Chubb, Elijah Moore, we already talked about this, Jared, but if it was my audio being out, again, guys, thank you so much for coming back to the second stream. It means a lot to be able to continue to do this, and I don't know what was happening. It must have been a mic issue because the internet looked good. I think I need to get a new wire, so I'm going to have to do that. Gus Bus or Jaylen Warren? Give me Jaylen Warren. Give me Jaylen Warren with this usage I've been seeing, so I'm going to go with Jaylen Warren. Gooner Boy, the man, the myth, the legend. Marv or Chubb? I'm going to go with Marv. I'm going to go with Marv in the full point PPR, but we have a lot of Marv conversation on the way, so you're going to want to stick around for that, Gooner. Vidal or Edwards? Any thoughts on Vidal assumes the JK role and Gus keeps his role? That's what I was talking about. Yeah, so we kind of talked about that too, Terminal, but this week, give me Edwards because I think I truly believe that the goal line work will be there. And I do believe that Vidal's going to have to earn it this week. If he doesn't have a hot hand, they will not go with him. He's shown that he has explosiveness when he got an opportunity, and he was just relegated back to being inactive immediately after that. So he's going to have to earn it. And because he's going to have to earn it, and because I don't know how the Haskins, Edwards, Vidal split will look in week 1 without JK, I'm going to go Edwards because I just know that the goal line work will be there. But like I said, make sure that Vidal's on that roster because he might just assume the JK role. We have to see it, though. We just have to see it. Here we go. We got one more from my man, Nikki K. Full point PPR is Dawson Knox viable with Kincaid out. In terms of tight end, yeah, I think he's definitely viable. Short-term passing looks like it's going to be on the slate tonight with the weather. I definitely think he's viable. So if you're deciding between Knox and Goddard or Knox and Conklin, I would go Knox. But if you can get your hands on a Disley, a Taysom Hill, or a Hunter Henry, that's kind of my split there, Nick. So if I can get Hunter Henry, Taysom Hill, Will Disley, Zach Ertz, I'd go with those tight ends. But if it's between Knox and Goddard, Freiermuth, Conklin, Gesicki, that range, then I would go. That's kind of where he's going to find for me. B-Rob, Juwan Jennings, or Amari Cooper, PPR. I mean, the snow thing just throws such a horrible wrinkle. Now, I'm going to go with B-Rob here. I think just the role. John Jennings I'm going to go Jennings. I'm going to go Jennings. I'm in the full PPR. He doesn't have to be a downfield threat guy. He's just been a huge target getter for Brock Purdy. So with Purdy being back, I'm going to go Jennings here, but it's close. It's definitely close. Pollard or Breece Hall, 1 point PPR. Franz, you're my guy. This is a tough one. I have a lot of love for Pollard, but Breece, I just have such trouble going against Breece. But if you're not as nervous about going against Breece, then let's go Pollard. It's close enough for me with the knee injury. Let's go Pollard. Goddard with the extra targets this week. D. Smith probably not going to play. It's a good point. That's a good point. Maybe that will bump him. So Nick, yeah, we're going to put Goddard above Knox with if Slim Reaper is out. That's a great point, Mighty Boosh. Thank you so much for coming to the next video. Video number 2, hanging out with the boys. All right, let's talk a little receiver here. So at the bottom of the screen, you'll see all of the rankings there. And again, if you want to get my complete set of rankings, you can go over to southharmonff.com and get those. We have an ad that I would have run, but since that seemed to be the stem of the issue for the audio, I'm not going to face it. So I'll do it myself. Go to southharmonff.com, get yourself the WoRP Tool, get yourself access to the articles, the rankings, all that good stuff. We're just killing it at southharmonff.com. But the first receiver that I have to talk about is Courtland Sutton. Because holy shit, folks, he has been unbelievable over this last 5-week span. So ever since that 0 dud game, week 7, Thursday Night Football against the Aints, he's been balling out. 17, 23, 19, 14.8, 29.7, 3 top 10 finishes last week. Wide receiver 2 targets, 11, 10, 9, 8, 10. He's been an absolute stud. So I had to rank him that way. He's my wide receiver 9 this week. But the reason why I wanted to bring him up, a reason why I needed to kind of highlight Courtland Sutton, like I said, theme of the show is making sure we get the wins this week to get us in the playoffs. The over-under of 42, okay, that's not a number we attack in fantasy, but that's kind of been the theme of the Broncos season because they got a good defense and an inexperienced offense. They are Monday Night Football at home. Cleveland doesn't really post a big – they don't really give up a ton in regards to fantasy points allowed to the opposing wide receivers. They're actually 22nd. They give up 4.7 points less than league average. But the reason why I'm still very much okay playing Courtland Sutton and the reason why I have him at wide receiver 9, the targets are there. Double-digit targets are more than a possibility on Monday Night Football. And the reason why I'm okay playing Courtland Sutton is Denzel Ward projects to be the cornerback that goes against him. Now, Denzel Ward's a pretty good cornerback. This isn't any slight to his skill set, but he is 5'11". Okay, so we are going to pick on the short kings today, and I'm sorry if you are a fellow short king, but Cortland Sutton's damn near 6'4". He's going to be able to get over the top. And the the Brown secondary has been able to be picked on this season when the wide receivers have size. And luckily, I mean, you look at Vele, if Reynolds plays, they're all tall. But Sutton is the one that I'm still targeting because Sutton's been on a heater, absolute burner. He's got the size to abuse a guy like Denzel Ward, like I said, sub 6 feet over as opposed to 6'4". And at the end of the day, he's going to get deep targets. He's 7th in the year in deep targets. He's going to get red zone targets. He has the second most red zone targets. And that is enough for me to go right back to the Sutton will, to have no problem playing Cortland Sutton. So I got him as a top 10 play. So if you were worried whether you should be playing him or not, have no fear. You're playing Cortland Sutton. I think he's going to be a top 10 receiver. That's how I got him ranked this week. The next receiver that I wanted to bring up is Marvin Harrison. So Marvin Harrison, we're not going to talk about his season, but I am going to talk about his season this episode. It just won't be right now. So if you want to hear about my thoughts on Marvin Harrison in terms of his seasonal output and what he might mean in Dynasty and how you should kind of value it, stick around for that. The WoRP section, we're going to get into that. Now I'm just going to talk about this week. This week, the Cardinals take on the Vikings in a pretty big game for them. You know, they're down to 6-5, heading on the road to the Vikings. Now, the Vikings secondary has been able to be beaten, but they're not an easy matchup by any stretch. They're about middle of the road. You give about a point over average. But the reason why I'm not uber bullish on Marvin Harrison this week, I got him at wide receiver 16, so it's not terrible. But again, this is a lot of adjustments. I've taken out a lot of wide receivers out of my rankings between Thanksgiving to today. Also, happy Thanksgiving. I know we're a couple days out, but I hope you had a great time with your family and friends. But this week, Marv is going to be, lining up against Stephon Gilmore a lot. And Gilly Lock, he's having a good season. He's, a top 5 cornerback in a lot of metrics this season. He's got the size to shut down Marvin Harrison. And I put together this little model that you can get if you join the Patreon, patreon.com/South Harmon. They're called the Cuck score. The corners under constant chaos. It is a matchup metric, a matchup model that highlights the easiest to the toughest matchups for wide receivers. And this week, Marvin Harrison has a negative Cuck score. It's not the worst, but it is bottom. It is bottom half, and it's negative. And I'm not saying bench him at all costs. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying if you need a win and you're deciding between him and a guy like Ladd McConkey, if you're deciding between Marvin Harrison and a guy like Zay Flowers, if you're deciding between Marvin Harrison and Calvin Ridley, Mike Evans, I'm saying you don't have to play Marvin. Now, if you're saying I have Marvin or I can play MVS, you're gonna play Marv. Or if you're saying I got Marv, but my alternative here is Amari Cooper, you're playing Marv. But like I said, he is in this range now where you may be deciding between guys like Cortland Sutton, Calvin Ridley, Mike Evans, Ladd McConkey, Zay Flowers, or Marvin Harrison. And I'm saying if you have some high-powered wide receiver options, or if you have some good flex options like a Bucky Irving, Chase Brown, I'd be okay benching. I'd be okay benching Marvin Harrison this week. I would, which is crazy to say. Absolutely crazy to say. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about his season and what I've thought about him this season later in the show. So stick around for that. Let's talk about some tight ends here. And then we'll get back to some questions after we go through the tight ends. First guy I got to talk about, Taysom Hill. That's kind of my analysis. I don't know what else to say. I'm sorry. I have him as a top 10 tight end. He's my tight end 10 on the dot. Love the matchup in terms of fantasy projections. Over under right around 50 at home against the Rams. Could be a lot of points scored. Easy matchup. The Rams have actually given up a lot of points over league average to tight ends. And the coach did say that they want to continue to utilize Taysom Hill in this what the fuck role. So I'm going to play him as a top 10 tight end. But oh my God, I mean, that game against the Browns in Week 11, it broke everyone's brain. It broke everyone's brain because 10 targets. He had over 100 passing yards. He had 8 receptions, but he also carried the ball. I mean, he had 45 or 42 fantasy points. It was bananas. And do I expect that again? No, probably never in his career. But if they're going to play him in this kind of wacky role and let him run 15 to 20 routes and be on the field about 60% of the time, whether it be at quarterback, running back, tight end, especially given the landscape of tight ends, fuck it. We're going to fire up Taysom Hill today. We're going to fire up Taysom Hill today. We're going to fire up Taysom Hill. I mean, over under a 50 in this matchup. I like this for a lot of the pass catchers. I like this for this in terms of this game's projection. So I'm going to play Taysom Hill. And if I get burned, we'll have to recalibrate. But if I need a win in Week 13 and I need a decision to be made at I have Taysom Hill or I have Mike Gesicki. I have Taysom Hill, and I've been kind of playing the roulette wheel. And this week I kind of scooped up a little Zach Ertz. I'm going Taysom Hill. You got to go Taysom Hill. It's crazy to say. It's absolutely bananas to say, but yeah, you got to go Taysom Hill. Now, this next tight end that I'm going to bring up, I'm not playing him this week, but I needed to bring him up because Darnell Washington could be a freak. This is more of a dynasty conversation, so I kind of cheated here. I know the theme of the day is win now, Week 13, but I needed to bring him up because he's inside my top 20 at tight end. And we've seen now a progression of usage that isn't startable in fantasy, but it's rosterable in dynasty. So over these last handful of weeks, so all the way back to Week 7, 4 targets, then back to 1, but then 3, 4, and 3. Okay, the numbers haven't been there quite yet, but now we're starting to see snap shares over 50% every single week. He's on the field a lot to block, so I know that's kind of leans into that. But the reason why I needed to bring him up, this guy's 6'7", 265 pounds. If Arthur Smith figures out a way to use him and Freiermuth at the same time, which they have, I'm not saying that they haven't, but that 12 personnel can be dangerous. There's still room for a guy like this to be productive. Probably not till next year. Again, this is not a conversation of 2024, not a conversation of Week 13, but just someone that I needed to bring up because he's kind of a freak. I just mentioned his size. He runs a 4.64, 85th percentile, 96th percentile speed score. Of course, that catch radius it's bananas, and he's only 23 years old. So if you can get him in Dynasty, in most places he's still not even rostered, you gotta pick him up. I just feel like he's a good guy to have at the bottom of your bench. And I know that's against the theme of the show, but at tight end, sometimes you're just kind of grasping at straws to kind of figure out what to talk about. And I just had to bring him up because he's starting to be used in a pass catching role. Like I said, 3 or more targets each of the last couple of weeks, 4 or more targets, 2 of the last 5 weeks. So we're seeing a build up towards potentially something. I mean, 36 yards, 42 yards. Again, I'm not saying start him, but you do got to pick him up. You do got to pick him up. I had to bring him up. Had to. All right, so let's get some questions in the chat, and then we're gonna talk a little bit about WoRP. We're gonna talk a little WoRP, everybody. Let me see here what we got in the chat. Let's start with this one here. Ruckus, my guy. Snoochie Boochies, my brother. Thoughts on Brees? Knee soreness coming out of the bye. Did not practice. He was limited practice, but then full. They did elevate. That's what made me the most nervous, Ruckus, that they did elevate a running back, but getting in that full practice Friday meant a lot for me, and I'm going to play him. There's really you'd have to have a bevy of running back options to not play him because the analytical profile's there. He's running a shitload of routes, and it seems like if he got a full practice in on Friday, then maybe it was just a tweak. It doesn't seem like anything to be nervous about. I'm going to play him. I have him as a top 5 play. I'm going to keep him there. So I'm not really nervous about the soreness coming out of the bye. I think He said he did tweak it before the bye. I would be more nervous if he tweaked it working out during the bye or Monday or something. He said he tweaked it in week 11 before the bye, so he's had a lot of time to rehab. And like I said, getting in that full practice put my mind at ease. And just in terms of the process, if again, you have to have a ridiculous running back room to bench him, but I have him as a top 5 play. I'm not really nervous about it. Castleback, what's up, Cass? Matt, you called Puka and Cup Stafford's double dragons. That one is fire. Needs to be a regular thing. Hell yeah, he is. Some teams got double dragons, and the Rams absolutely got the double dragons. Metcalf, Cooper, Pittman, 1 point PPR. I'm going to go Metcalf. It's only because I don't love the other options. I like Pittman this week, but he's going to get a lot of Christian Gonzalez. They're going to run the ball a ton. And I don't know if the middle of the field's going to have to be covered, have to be concerned about with Josh Downs out. So I wonder if the Patriots can kind of just really kind of pay attention to Pittman, make Anthony Richardson beat him with deep balls to Alec Pierce. So I do like Pittman, but I like Metcalf a little bit more. But if you in your gut love Pittman, it's close enough to take it. But if it was me and it was my decision, I would be going with DK Metcalf for sure. Pick 2, Connor, Pollard, BTJ. I'm going to go with the running backs here. Okay, cool. Hook them. Yeah, I'm going to go with Connor. I'm going to go in Pollard. I'm going to go with the running backs. Gagnon wants to get Marv going. Let's ride. Gagnon ain't on the field. And like Kyler Murray said at the beginning of the season, it ain't his job to get Marvin the ball. Marvin's been, well, we're going to talk about Marvin. We'll get into more talks about Marvin. I'm interested in trying to incorporate WoRP into next year's analysis. Yo, Rob, WoRP it's awesome in season. It's awesome for draft prep. It's awesome for everything. It really just kind of shows value. And let's get into it, Rob. That's a great segue, Rob. Thank you, my man, Harry Snowman. So each week I like to do a segment that I call This Week in WoRP. Now, WoRP is wins above replacement. It is a quantifiable metric that transcends position. So it allows you to see how valuable is your player relative to a replacement level guy at that position. So where does running back 17 stack up to the wide receivers? Where does tight end 5 stack up to the rest of the positions? And spoiler alert, not very good. But WoRP, it's the best tool that you can use in terms of understanding and taking advantage of value, whether it be value pockets or value opportunities, whatever it is. WoRP will help you get there and help you kind of discern from what's real, what's fake, who's valuable, who's not, who can I trade away to bolster another position because his replacement level is a lot closer. We also have WoRP, which is adjusted wins over replacement, which takes into account how much they're started. And you can get all that at southharmonff.com. There's graphs that, for me, a visual guy, I like to see the graphs and see where a guy stacks up in relativity to other people at different positions. So WoRP is a fantastic tool. I cannot thank it enough, or I cannot use it enough because it really is the best tool out there. So you can get that at southharmonff.com. And the first takeaway when looking at WoRP this week was, this is the year of the running back. This is the year of the running back. Now, when you look at the WoRP charts, you'll notice 17 of the top 30 players overall are running backs. Now, this is a year like I've been playing fantasy a long time, and there hasn't been this many running backs staying healthy and being effective for this long in maybe ever. And whether it be Joe Mixon on a new team or Breece Hall, Bijan bringing their value, Saquon going berserk, we've barely seen Christian McCaffrey on the field, and yet running backs are still absolutely berserk, super valuable. And not only are they valuable in terms of the top guys, which is great because when we were building teams, if you went with a handful of receivers, your team's probably not great. But if you went running back, man, you were zigging while everyone else was zagging. You probably have a good team. I mean, Barkley, Henry, Alvin Kamara, all in the top 5. And you were able to get Henry and Kamara in round 4, round 5. Mixon, Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs. And like I said, even the guys that we were not expecting have really just taken that jump into the top 30. Chuba Hubbard, even DeAndre Swift has been so good in fantasy, very, very valuable. And this position always gets a value boost in your marketplace, in your league market. Like running backs are always traded for seconds, for firsts, even though they're not great, because teams need running backs. They're desperate for running backs. And this year, people haven't really been desperate because they've just been awesome. They've been so good. And the WoRP supports it. You look at the WoRP, the A-WoRP, these guys have been awesome. And I think I would imagine if we could get a poll out there to everyone who plays fantasy, you'd see a lot of lineups where running backs are in the flex. And that's just something I haven't seen before. And something I just needed to talk about. I needed to talk about because it's just, I'm a usual, anchor RB drafter. I'm a trade all my RBs for running backs, for receivers in the offseason type of guy. But the question's going to be, folks, will this translate year to year? Or we all zig? Will the zig next year be running back heavy, but the zag will be to revert back to receivers? How will that go? That's where I'm mostly very, very curious of. But yeah, so far this year, the running backs have been ridiculous. Now, the next thing I need to talk about is Marvin Harris has been a year one bust. I'm not calling him a bust as a prospect, but in terms of year one, he's been a bust. This is a guy that was going at the end of round one, beginning of round two in redrafts. He was being taken over Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp. He was being taken over Garrett Wilson in some aspects. I mean, there was a lot of people, rightfully so, but they were very bullish on this receiver. And when you look at his WoRP, you'll realize he's been a bust this year. He's not even in the top 65 overall players, but you're having to take him, like I said, as a top 15 overall player. He's not even in the top 65, according to WoRP. And in this year right now, as it stands, he's wide receiver 32 in WoRP. I don't know what to say about Marvin Harrison. I'm not panic selling in Dynasty, but I'm also shopping him. I think there are receivers I'd rather have, especially if I can get a second piece with it. And a guy like, you probably missed the boat, but like a JSN comes to mind. But yeah, when you look at his analytical profile also, it does not support a guy that's been successful but unlucky. 6 touchdowns. He has a 17% TD rate, 4th highest in the NFL. His unrealized air yards, it's low, so it's not like he's just not connecting. His yards per route run is outside of the top 45. His yards per team pass attempt is outside the top 30 in the NFL amongst qualified wide receivers. He's getting the volume, I'd say. Top 10 in deep targets, 8th in air yard share. He's got a 20% target share or 22% target share. But he's been a bust. When you look at the WoRP, he's been a bust. And if you have had the WoRP charts all season, you could have been selling your Marv in seasonal leagues for other players, and you'd be a lot better off for it. Now, in Dynasty, the conversation is going to be pretty vast, and it's going to be pretty important over these next few weeks for a lot of people to have the idea what they should do with a guy like Marvin Harrison. But yeah, in 24, he's been an absolute bust. He's been a bust. And now, unfortunately, if you're a bust in your rookie year, you're on a trajectory to be a bust. Now, will he be a bust? I'm not there yet. I still believe in the talent, the draft capital, the quarterback situation, all that. But when you see a guy of this caliber really just being a touchdown-dependent second option to Trey McBride, it doesn't bode well. So, yeah, it's official. You can say Marvin Harrison has been an objective year one bust. He is a rookie bust. This is why I was taking my league neighbors over him. But again, I was not sitting here victory lapping or nothing. Anywhere I could have gotten Marv with as long as Malik was off the board, I was taking him. So I'm not going to sit here and toot my own horn because it ain't worth it. But yeah, Year one, absolute bust. And if you had the WoRP charts, you would have seen it and maybe been able to play off it. Hopefully your deadline hasn't passed, but probably has in seasonal. But if it hasn't, I'm shopping. Especially if he has a good game today, shop him tomorrow immediately. The WoRP suggests he's been pretty damn replaceable. And the last player that I need to talk about is Jonnu Smith. Fantasy football is going to fantasy football. Jonnu Smith's been absolutely crushing it all the way back since week 5. And over the last 4 weeks, he's just been an absolute monster. Absolute monster. So let's look at it from these last 2 weeks. He's been tight end, I guess he's not technically tight end 2 this week yet. But again, another huge performance on Thanksgiving. He's in line to have 3 straight top 3 finishes at tight end. But in week 11, almost 30 fantasy points. In week 12, almost 25 fantasy points. And the targets, man. I mean, the 10 targets this week, 11 targets in week 12, 8 targets in week 11. He's really just become the over-the-middle guy, and it's been so bad for Tyreek Hill. Now, what does the WoRP suggest? It suggests that on a per-game basis, Jonnu Smith's been nasty. So if you look at WoRP per game, and the only reason I'm using the per-game metric here is because his usage has been pretty erratic. His situation has been erratic with Tua being out early in the season. So if you look at a per game basis, it gives you a little bit more accurate picture as to how he performs relative to the league on a per game basis, obviously. And he's been a top 25 overall player in WoRP per game. Overall player. He's been the second best, most valuable tight end on a per game basis. And that includes Brock Bowers. Now that may change. Actually, they both had good games, so who knows? But he's been fantastic. And if you were able to scoop him up, this is the definition of a league winner. And we got Sage in the chat, fire McDaniels, because it's been bad for Tyreek. It's been bad for Tyreek. But Tyreek got a good game on Thursday. Maybe they can figure it out. Maybe they can kind of get it going, But I had to bring up Jonnu Smith because the WoRP suggests and the WoRP completely, supports the numbers that we're seeing, the surface stats we're seeing in fantasy. So you got to love it. Got to love it. Now, that's the show. But before we get out of here, of course, we're going to answer all the questions. So if you've got some lineup decisions, roster decisions to be made, anything week 13 or beyond related, drop it in the chat. We'll talk about it. How am I ranking the Browns wide receiver with Tillman out? The only player I'm willing to play is Judy. I got him as a top 30 play. Still have Elijah Moore a little bit lower. I don't love him, but I do. He's a top 40 guy. I like Judy. The volume's been there. And without Tillman, they're probably going to force it his way. I do like it for Njoku more than anything. So Njoku goes up. He's now going to be in my top 5 of the rankings. Of course, you can get my rankings over at southharmonff.com. Deontay Johnson or Jeremy McNichols. Got to go McNichols. Deontay has no role. He's just been nothing. He's been absolutely nothing. So you got to go McNichols, who now has a projected role with Eckler out for the next 4 weeks. Durko, the volume Marv is getting is if Murray can get it to McBride, Wilson, or Connor, he just throws up to Marv's direction. But do you like that? Is that what you wanted out of the 4th overall pick in the NFL draft, the 101 in single QB rookie drafts? That's not what we like. We like what we've seen out of Malik, where they're just force feeding. We want force feed out of that type of player. Pick 2, Chubb versus Devontae Smith versus Cooper versus Shakir. Significant difference. Also, would you start Chubb over Najee, then start 2 of the 3 wide receivers? So Devontae Smith looks like he's not going to play, so we're going to take that out of it. And if we're looking at 2, I'm going to play Chubb, and I will play Najee. So I'll play Najee, Chubb, and then start Shakir over Cooper. But I think next week, my man Cody Carpenter says next week's going to be the coming out party for Cooper, not this week. So I'm going to go with Chubb, Harris, and Shakir. Ridley or McConkey today. Those are two good Landry. You got 2 good ones there. I'm going to go with McConkey. Slightly. I got McConkey at 12. I do have Ridley at 10, but it's close enough for me. I'm going to chase the matchup. I think they're going to have a lot of points scored in that indoor arena football type of game, Falcons versus the Chargers. And again, we talked a lot about the Falcons side of things. I love the Chargers side of things. So I'm going to go McConkey there. Got a rough one. Another one, Ben. Oh, Ben, I got you if it's a rough one. Pick 3. Need at least one wide receiver. McLaurin, Najee, Ramondre, DTJ, and Debo. For sure going McLaurin. And then after that, you need 2 more. I think I'm going to go all wide receivers here if you can. Because Debo in the snow, he's going to get a lot of touches. No, we're going to go McLaurin. We're going to go Ramondre. We're going to go Debo. That's what we're going to do. Bargustus, everyone down on Benson post extension. Remember, most extended last year. I would buy in Dynasty. You're going to get him at dirt cheap prices now, and he's still an injury away. He was an injury away this year. He's going to be an injury away next year, but he's a good player. So I'm gonna go with I'm gonna be okay buying me a little bit of Benson here on the low. You trust in T-Law today. I like the matchup, but I'm worried he leaves the game early with a re-injury. Sage, it's a pretty good call. I am not super high on Lawrence. I got him at quarterback 19. I'd play Kirk Cousins over him. I'd play Brock Purdy in the snow over him. I'd play Drake May over him. I'd play Sam Darnold. I'd play Geno Smith over him. Guys I wouldn't play would be like Carr, Jameis, Bryce Young, Will Levis. But I agree, the re-injury risk is there. A guy can just land on that shoulder and he's out for the game. McConkey Kong, let's go McConkey Kong. Love it. And I love all you guys. Thank you guys for tuning in, tapping in, and thank you guys so much for following me to the second broadcast. I don't know what happened to technical difficulties, but you guys are the best for rocking with me, best for following me here to the second stream. We're going to make sure we get them week 13 dubs. Let's get those week 13 dubs. I love you guys so much. Thank you for tuning in, tapping in. Keep game playing, my friends, and I will see you next week. Peace. If you're loving the content here on the South Harmon YouTube channel, you gotta check out the South Harmon Podcast Network. The South Harmon Podcast Network is your one-stop destination for all things fantasy football. Everything from lineup advice and trade strategies to Dynasty League domination, we've got you covered. That's right, people. It's the same host that you know and love from YouTube, bringing you deeper insights and exclusive tips you won't find anywhere else. You can find the South Harmon Podcast Network wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe today and let's start getting them dubs, people. Now,